Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth, also known as the Continuum Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Chris Kent, the Game Master, and today we're talking about Captain America. But before we get into that, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment, because that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. We have a great community here, and it's all thanks to you guys. Thank you so much for being here. That said, let's dive in. Prologue to this one takes place in 1941. As the ruthless warmongers in Europe focus their eyes on a peace-loving America, the youth of the country heed the call to arm for defense. But as great as the danger from a foreign attack is the threat of invasion from within and the dreaded fifth column. German spies come to America. They use forged documents and join the army. Then they destroy a munitions plant. In Washington, D.C., an army general tells the president that there's no stopping these vermin. They are so firmly entrenched in the ranks that he hesitates to give a confidential report even to his most trusted aide. Another man says an army with spies is useless. FDR says something must be done. FDR says to send in J. Edgar Hoover, who upon entering is introduced as the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. FDR says Hoover may have a plan that interests them. So, at Hoover's request, the Army men disguise themselves in civilian clothing. They then follow him to a waiting car. Then they are driven to a shabby tenement district where they pull up to a sinister-looking curio shop. Hoover explains that the shop is merely a blind, behind which a secret is being perfected. The shopkeeper of the curio shop looks like an old woman. With a gnarled, bony hand, she reaches into a drawer for her sidearm. But Hoover tells her there's nothing to worry about. He explains that these men are high-ranking army officials. She says she's glad to see Hoover, adding that the formula is ready, and the men in back are waiting for him now. The officials follow Hoover through a maze of decrepit old rooms and stop at a heavily barred door, which opens at a whispered command. The door opens and a man inside says, "Mr. Hoover, we were hoping you'd come." The astonished men enter to find a surprisingly modern laboratory. The army officials gasp in startled amazement as the wrinkled old shopkeeper removes the mask she was wearing. She sheds her wizened features to become an astoundingly beautiful young woman. Hoover refers to her as X-13, one of America's most trusted agents. Hoover and X-13 gesture for the military personnel to take their seat in a small observation room as a group of scientists reveal the fruit of the experiment. The side door opens and a frail young man named Steve Rogers steps into the laboratory. Dr. Abraham Erskine says, "Don't be afraid, son." Steve takes his place. He is injected with the super soldier serum and bombarded by Vita radiation. The people in the observation room gape in wonder at the scene before them. Dr. Erskine says, "Behold, the crowning achievement of all my years of research, the first of a corps of super agents whose mental and physical ability will make them a terror to spies and saboteurs." But the hand of democracy's enemy reaches deep into the ranks of America's high officials. One of the army men witnessing the demonstration has been paid off by the Germans. He says, "I'm afraid this is one experiment that must never reach its final test." A shot rings out, and Dr. Erskine slumps over. The now muscular Steve Rogers grabs Erskine's body as it begins to fall. The spy's weapon fires again, and the vial containing the super soldier serum shatters into 1,000 pieces. The assassin runs out, and dying in Steve's arms, Dr. Erskine, now unable to speak, points at Steve's heart, reminding him of why Erskine chose him over other potential candidates. Steve bolts up the stairs and through the back rooms of the curio shop. Meanwhile, General Kruger runs outside where he gets into a car. As various American guards in civilian clothing open fire on Kruger, he returns fire with a Tommy gun. He speeds away from the scene. Which brings us to the main plot of this game session. Steve Rogers bolts outside, running faster than ever before with his newly enhanced leg muscles. For a second, Steve is running as fast as he used to run, or to phrase that a bit differently, as fast as he thinks he can run. But it occurs to him that now he's capable of much more, so then he really gets going. As Kruger's car slows down to take a corner, Steve just keeps going, taking corners without slowing. Kruger slows down or has to dodge other cars on the street, while Steve vaults over them at maximum sprint. He's running at about 30 miles an hour, by the way. He sees Kruger's car turn left, so Steve cuts down an alley, but it ends in a chain link fence. So Steve rolls versus the acrobatics skill, and Jackie Chan's his way over the fence, back to the main street that Kruger is now just turning onto. Kruger looks behind him and sees Steve in the rearview mirror. When he looks at the road again, he is forced to slam on the brakes. His car slides sideways, nearly colliding with the building where the street ended. Kruger drives in this new direction. Steve runs up onto a flatbed truck, then onto the cab, then leaps from car roof to car roof, getting ever closer to his prey. Steve leaps and lands on Kruger's roof, making a dexterity check. Steve holds on tight as Kruger zigs and zags. So that's Steve's strength versus the car's APs of speed, which, in congested New York City traffic, is not as fast as one might think. So Steve is able to hold on. Kruger starts to fire straight up, blowing holes through the car's roof. So Steve slides down the back of the car. As Steve hugs the rear bumper, Kruger looks around, trying to figure out where he is. When he looks back at the road, he sees a truck in his path. Kruger makes a roll using his vehicle skill, but fails. His car smashes into the truck just as Steve lets go. Kruger's car rolls, which causes Kruger to lose nearly all of his hit points in the crash. Kruger staggers out of the car and takes a shot at Steve with a penalty for being so dizzy, but he misses. Steve runs up and punches Kruger in the face. Kruger is knocked out. Which brings us to our epilogue. Although the super soldier serum was destroyed, its first creation, Captain America, becomes a powerful force in the battle against spies and saboteurs. A whole nation thrills to his daring exploits. His name becomes a symbol of courage to millions of Americans and a terror to the shadow world of spies. At Camp Leigh of the United States Army, Bucky Barnes is the mascot of the regiment. He approaches Steve, showing him a newspaper article about Captain America. Bucky says he'd like to meet Cap one day, adding that he wishes he could be like him. Steve says, "Maybe you can, Bucky. Maybe you can." And that was it for that game session. The art for this week's game, by the way, was not based on the Chris Evans version of Captain America. I've watched some interviews with Chris Evans where, in my humble opinion, he has said some pretty unkind things. And while he's not my cup of tea, his movies had a great costume and a really good budget. Ironically, there was a Captain America movie back in the day that had practically no budget, and they gave that poor guy one of the worst superhero costumes ever. His name is Reb Brown, and he's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I've never heard him say one unkind word about anybody ever. He's constantly visiting children's hospitals and events that honor our veterans. He's just an awesome guy. So to me, he is my Captain America. So we based our cap on him rather than Evans. We just give Mr. Brown a better costume than the one he was handed all those decades ago. And in our opinion, better writing too. Um, but so we enjoyed it at any rate. We hope that you enjoyed hearing about it. If so, as always, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and as always, be sure to leave us a comment as that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. All that said, I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you in the next video.